In 1859, a respected London woman named Mrs. Whitmore arrived at her physician's office burdened with sleeplessness, unsteady nerves, irritability, and a series of episodes she described only as nervous spells. These symptoms were extremely common among Victorian women, and they aligned perfectly with what doctors of the era labeled hysteria. In a time when medical science was filled with misunderstandings about the female body, hysteria served as a catch-all diagnosis, one used to explain virtually anything that seemed emotionally or physically troubling in women. Following accepted medical procedure, her physician prepared to administer the standard treatment, one considered entirely legitimate and routinely practiced across Europe and the United States. He placed her on the examination table, shielded her modestly with a drape, applied perfumed oils, and manually stimulated her genitals until she reached what he recorded clinically as a hysterical paroxysm. Today it is unmistakable that this was an induced orgasm, but the doctors of the time appeared unaware of the sexual nature of their actions. Hysteria was one of the oldest concepts in Western medicine. Its roots stretched back thousands of years to ancient Egypt and Greece. Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, gave the condition its name. Hysteria meant uterus in Greek. He believed the womb was capable of wandering inside the body, exerting pressure on organs, and disrupting physical and mental health. Plato further described the womb as an animal within an animal that longed for reproduction. When deprived of pregnancy, this restless organ was said to roam upward, causing breathlessness, fits, anxiety, and distress. Physicians recommended marriage and childbirth as the cure, cementing the idea that women's health revolved entirely around reproduction. By the Renaissance, European doctors discarded the literal idea of the wandering womb, but continued using hysteria as a diagnosis. Its symptoms expanded to such absurd proportions that nearly any behavior could fall under its umbrella. Nervousness, sadness, irritability, insomnia, fainting, disinterest in marriage, too much interest in marriage, low libido, excessive libido, sharp moods, or even just dissatisfaction with domestic life could be interpreted as signs of hysteria. Thomas Sydenham, a leading English physician of the 17th century, claimed it was the second most common illness after fever. During the Victorian period, these ideas intensified. Women were increasingly described as fragile creatures whose bodies and emotions were controlled by their reproductive organs. The notion that women were inherently pure, passive, and largely free of sexual desire became widespread among the educated classes. Dr. William Acton famously wrote that most respectable women were not troubled by sexual feelings. Because the prevailing culture denied the existence of female sexual desire, symptoms that resulted from sexual frustration could not be understood for what they were. Instead, they were interpreted as signs of illness. This denial shaped medical treatment. The most common therapy for hysteria became pelvic massage to induce hysterical paroxysm. Doctors performed these procedures with clinical detachment. They described the flushed cheeks, involuntary contractions, heavy lubrication, and deep relaxation of their patients using purely medical terminology. They spoke of the procedure as tedious and physically demanding, comparing it to laborious manual work rather than recognizing it as sexual contact. Some physicians admitted the treatment could take an hour or more, leaving them exhausted. Enormous demand for this therapy led certain practitioners to build entire practices around hysteria, serving long lines of patients each week. Wealthier women often requested treatments in the privacy of their own homes, while others sought hydrotherapy at specialized spas. These facilities used jets of water directed at the genitals, a method known as the pelvic shower. In places like Bath in England and Baden-Baden in Germany, such treatments became fashionable. Patients might spend weeks undergoing multiple daily sessions, and many left with renewed energy and improved spirits. The relief they felt was real, but the underlying cause remained unspoken due to strict cultural norms. By the late 19th century, physicians' hands were quite literally overworked. Some admitted that the procedure exhausted them, and the time required for each session was immense. Dr. Joseph Mortimer Granville, seeking a way to ease his strained muscles, invented a mechanical device called the percussor. He claimed it was designed for muscular therapy, but other doctors quickly realized its usefulness for hysteria treatment. The device vibrated rapidly, and what once took more than an hour could now be accomplished in minutes. This innovation sparked the rise of the first electric vibrators. Within a decade, vibrators became widespread in medical practice. Manufacturers released countless models, some handheld, others large and elaborate. They appeared in catalogs intended for physicians, advertised as efficient, respectable therapeutic devices. By 1900, vibrators had become the fifth most common household electrical appliance in the United States, purchased alongside sewing machines and early toasters. Sears, Roebuck & Co. sold home vibrators with claims of health, vitality, and rejuvenation. Advertisements featured women holding the devices to their faces or necks, maintaining a facade of medical legitimacy. What remains extraordinary is the sheer cultural blindness surrounding these treatments. Doctors, patients, and manufacturers appeared oblivious to the sexual function of these procedures and devices. Medical education at the time rarely acknowledged female sexuality. The clitoris was dismissed or ignored entirely. Many physicians believed women were almost devoid of sexual desire, and so they interpreted orgasms as therapeutic muscle spasms rather than sexual release. Yet some women clearly understood more than they could publicly express. Diaries reveal subtle hints of anticipation before appointments and profound relief afterward. Women recommended their physicians to friends, creating circles of regular patients who all underwent similar treatments. For many, these sessions may have been the only source of sexual satisfaction they ever experienced. The cultural refusal to acknowledge female sexuality also led to far darker treatments. Some doctors believed masturbation was dangerous and attempted to cure it through extreme measures. Clitoridectomies were performed on girls and women in the name of preventing self-stimulation. Others used acid to cauterize the clitoris. Isaac Baker Brown, a prominent London surgeon and president of the Medical Society, performed such operations believing he was curing hysteria. He was removed from his position not because his methods were brutal, but because he performed surgeries without proper consent. Meanwhile, hysteria treatment had become a profitable industry. By 1895, American physicians were collectively earning millions annually from treating hysteria, equivalent to hundreds of millions today. Inventors and manufacturers continued producing more complex machines, hand-crank vibrators, electric models with interchangeable attachments, and even treatment chairs with built-in vibrating mechanisms. Devices such as the Vibril and the Pulsocken promised unmatched relief for the supposedly delicate female constitution. Historians estimate that between 1850 and 1920, millions of women received regular hysteria treatments. Even if only a small percentage of adult women sought this therapy, the sheer number of sessions, performed weekly or bi-weekly over the course of many years, adds up to tens of millions of medically induced orgasms administered by physicians who believed they were treating an illness. The decline of the hysteria diagnosis emerged from multiple sources. Sigmund Freud, though flawed in many aspects, acknowledged that women had sexual desires and that hysteria was rooted in psychological conflicts rather than physical disturbances of the reproductive organs. These ideas began to erode the foundations of hysteria treatment. By the early 1920s, psychiatry shifted away from the diagnosis, and the medical community began to reconsider its long-held assumptions. The final blow came from an unexpected direction: early pornography. In the 1920s, underground films began depicting vibrators explicitly as sexual devices. Once vibrators became linked to sexual imagery, they could no longer be marketed as respectable medical instruments. Stores withdrew them from catalogs, doctors quietly abandoned their therapeutic use, and the devices disappeared from clinics. By 1952, the American Psychiatric Association removed hysteria from its official diagnostic manual entirely. Nevertheless, the cultural legacy of hysteria endured. For decades afterward, women continued to encounter medical dismissal, their symptoms too often attributed to emotional fragility rather than genuine health concerns. The attitudes embedded in centuries of misunderstanding did not vanish immediately. Only with the groundbreaking work of Masters and Johnson in the 1960s did female sexuality begin receiving serious scientific attention. Their findings confirmed what Victorian women had long experienced but could not articulate. The so-called hysterical paroxysm was simply orgasm. Today, the history of hysteria stands as one of the strangest chapters in medicine. It reveals how cultural beliefs can distort scientific understanding and shape the treatment of millions. Physicians, trained in prestigious institutions, were so profoundly affected by cultural repression that they failed to recognize the nature of their own actions. They unintentionally invented one of the earliest electrical household devices while attempting to treat a disorder that never truly existed. The story illustrates how medical science can be molded by social norms, how ignorance can persist in the presence of evidence, and how deeply the human body can be misunderstood when viewed through the lens of cultural denial. It remains an astonishing example of how an entire profession misinterpreted a basic bodily function, transforming what we now recognize as sexual release into a century-long medical enterprise.